Hey guys, this is Mitch with 5.CGI, and today we're going to talk about how to make brick break using Godot. So this is kind of another beginner-ish tutorial where I talk to you guys about how to make the classic game brick break, the little game where you have like a ping pong ball and these bricks where you have to hit the ball and hit the bricks. So it's going to be a fun little game, but we're going to go through how to move your paddle, how to actually create a brick, how to handle collisions, how to handle score, and the end game state. So how do you actually reset when somebody wins or loses? And we're going to talk about how to do a very basic pulse animation for your press any key to reset the game. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to make our paddle. So in order to make a paddle, what we have to do is we're going to make a 2D scene. This is going to be our game manager here, or our scene manager, depending on how you want to set up your project. Now I will right click, add in a child node. We're going to add in a character body 2D. I'm going to rename that as paddle. And then I'm going to right click and go ahead and attach a sprite. And then we will also drag this icon right into that sprite. And then I'm going to right click, add in another child node. We're going to add in a collision shape 2D. Now this collision shape is going to be a rectangular shape, and I'm going to come in here, zoom in nice and tight, and we'll make this object we'll go into rectangle, and our extents is going to be 100 pixels by 20 pixels. I think that that's fair and should be a pretty reasonable sized paddle. I'm going to grab my sprite, and I'm going to make my sprite match this. Now I understand that it'd be nice if we had a real sprite here, but I'll just use the Godot sprite. Now I'm going to grab this panel and move it to the center of the scene. So we'll kind of drag it down here and put it right somewhere right like here-ish. Now, once we have it right here, if I zoom in here, and then I'm going to right click and attach a script, and I'm going to call it paddle.gd. Now, most of this stuff is relatively useless, but I'm going to keep speed, but I'm going to, instead of changing it from a constant, I'm going to say var, and I'm going to go at export var, and then we'll go speed like that. And I'm going to make it 300. Now, you'll see, of course, it's going to get mad at me, so I will go ahead and change that. So we'll copy this guy and paste it and paste it. Now, what we're looking for is when you hit left and right, we want to go left and right. Pretty simple. And that's pretty much it. So we'll basically just pull out handle jump, and we'll pull out this add gravity section here because we don't want gravity. And this should pretty much handle 99% of what we need. So if I hit play and I save my scene here, you'll see that we have a paddle that we can hit left and right, and the paddle will move. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now that we have that, let's actually set up a brick. Because brick break works by having different bricks that when they are hit, they disappear. What we're going to do is we'll make a static object here that we can use for our bricks. So we'll click on our game manager and type static body 2D. We'll go ahead and right click, add a child node. We'll add in a sprite, and we will also add in a collision box. So we'll add in a collision shape, and we'll come in here and put in a rectangular shape. I'm going to hit F to snap to my Godot scene here. I'll zoom in, and we'll add in our sprite here, which once again is going to be an icon. So we'll just do the Godot icon. And we'll come in here and make it somewhere in the vein of, we'll bring the scale down. We'll also bring the scale down as well. We'll make it something like this. So 0.3, 0.4, something like that, maybe 0.2 if we want to. And then we'll change our collision shape to match. So we'll drag this guy down. We'll drag this guy up like so. And then we will call this brick. Now, once we have this, we'll kind of put it, I don't know, somewhere here in the center of the screen here. Now, this might be a little bit on the too small side. Looking at it, it looks a little tiny, So that might not be the right size. So if we hit play, let's see how big it is. Yeah, that's a little on the small side. So I'm going to go ahead and make it just a touch bit bigger. So I'll zoom in and make this just a little bit bigger. So we'll go to our sprite. We'll make it from 0.16 to 0.3 and from 0.02 to 0.1. And then we'll change our collision shape to match. There we go. And if we zoom out, that should give us a little bit better of a size, I think, and that should just work. So if we hit play, let's take a look. Yeah, that's a much more reasonable size, so that should work. So now all we have to do is create our ball. And our ball is going to be really simple. We'll go ahead and right click, add a child node, and we will add in a rigid body 2D. Now our rigid body is going to be a ball like shape, but in my case, once again, I'm just going to use icon SVG. So we'll bring that in and we'll just do position 0 and we'll drag it underneath our rigid body, right click, add a child node, add in a collision shape 2D. We'll go like this, click on the shape and change it into a circle shape, and that's going to make it into a ball. And you'll see that we have our little ball right here, which you can't quite see due to the color of our icon. So let's change the size of our icon down to something like this. So it just kind of fits nicely inside of this little ball here. Now this might be a little bit too small, so we'll have to find out. So looking at it, if we kind of move it to the center of the screen real quick, let's just drag it over here. It's probably too small for the user to be able to see. If I hit play, you'll see there's my ball. It just knocked my character body out of the way, but the question is that ball big enough? And I don't think it is, so I'm going to make it just a touch bigger. So instead of it being 0.1, I'm going to go with 0.2 and 0.2 like that. And then I'm going to grab my collision shape and make it just a slight bit bigger. So something like that. And that should work. Now, technically you're going to want a ball sprite here, but I don't have a ball sprite, so we're going to go with this for now. And I'm going to call this ball. Now for our ball, what we're going to do is create a script for it. So we'll right click and attach a script. We'll hit enter and you'll see that we have a rigid body 2D script. Now in the top of our rigid body 2D script, we're going to need to have a couple of variables. So first things first, I'm going to export out a var speed and I'm going to make that equal to 200. And that's just in my testing what has worked in the past. So we'll do that. And then I will also have a var for velocity. Okay. And we'll make that colon equal to a vector 2. And we'll make that 1 comma minus 1 like that dot multiplied by speed. And the reason why I'm doing this is because on initial load, I'm going to want to set a speed to that ball, right? I'm going to want that ball to start moving immediately. So that's kind of why I'm approaching it that way. Now, once we get into our ready statement on startup, we're going to want to do a few things. First things first, you can either come in here and set gravity scale by doing gravity scale is equal to 0 because we don't want it to actually be affected by gravity, or we can do that right here by setting our gravity scale. So it's completely up to you on whichever one you want to go with, but that is something to keep in mind. Now, if we refresh and run this really quick, you'll see we have a ball. It's not doing anything, but we at least have a ball. So how can we actually make it move? Well, we have to impart a force on it. And since we're trying to control this through code instead of through rigid body physics, we're going to actually control it using linear velocity. So I'm going to use what's called the integrated forces function call. So we'll say func underscore integrated forces, enter. And what I'll do is I'll type linear velocity is equal to linear velocity dot normalized multiplied by speed, like that. And then you'll see that if we hit play, well, nothing happens. So the reason why is because this is effectively doing nothing. It's just saying, hey, take the current velocity that you have, normalize it so you get the directional vector and then multiply it by speed. So that's an extremely complicated way of saying if you're going a direction, continue going that direction, but don't lose speed. That just makes it so that it goes the same direction and doesn't lose speed ever. It'll just keep going forever. Now, that's great, but how can I get it to actually move forward? Well, what we can do is we can type linear velocity is equal to velocity, like that, right? And if I hit play, you'll see now the ball is moving. So that's cool. Okay, great. So now the ball is actually doing things. But what is the point of this, right? If this exists. So the reason why we're going to do this is because we only really want to change the direction of the ball if it hits something. So, okay, how do we actually handle that? And do we really need to do that? Well, first things first, let's actually test that, right? Let's see. So let's do linear velocity is equal to velocity right here. And let's see what happens if we do that. If we hit play, you'll see the ball is moving. Okay, so that's great. What happens if we let's create a ceiling boundary up here. Let's right click, add a child node, and say static body 2D. Let's right click on it and add in a collision shape 2D, and then let's make that a rectangular shape. Now I'm going to drag that rectangular shape up like that, and I'm going to kind of align it with my stuff. So now what happens if we hit play? So it's going up to the roof, and it's not doing what we want, right? It hits the ceiling, but then it continues to try to go in that direction. So what happens if we want it to bounce off? Well, we could come in here and we could go into our physics material and add in a bouncy physics material, right? Let's go with like a 1 bounce, right? So what happens if we do that? Well, that seems to be working, right? It bounced. It did what we expected. So that's good. What happens if we hit it with our paddle? So it bounces off. Let's hit it with our paddle. Well, our paddle goes falling. So that's not great, but at least that's something, right? Something's going on. How can we get our paddle to actually not fall? Well, if we go back into our paddle, we take a look at it. And you'll see that there's really no options over here to lock our forces. So you can see if I open these guys up, you'll see that there's really not much here. Like we have a dampen, which isn't super helpful. We have a solver, which also isn't really all that helpful. And we have deactivation, which we could freeze it, but if we freeze it, then we have to move it by position, right? So unfortunately, there's really no easy way to handle this without possibly making your mass maybe really something crazy, or changing our gravity scale to 0, but then the ball's velocity would affect my paddle. So that's not really a great option either. So what can we do? Well, we could, instead of doing move and slide, we could actually come in and set our position directly, right? And that would solve this problem. And so in order to do that, we can come in here, get rid of this, and then just do vector 2 direction multiplied by speed, comma 0. And then we can take this value here, get rid of it, drop this as a capital S, and then multiply by delta. And then we can do the exact same thing here. Instead of doing velocity X, we can just come in, go velocity, and then vector 2 bracket like that, comma 0 multiplied by delta. And then we can just basically set our position here. So position plus equals vector 2, or velocity, I'm sorry, like that. And now you'll see that we still have the same control that we had before. It works the exact same way. But when a ball hits us, which granted, it's really hard to tell because I don't have a collision shape on the rest of my walls. So let's go ahead and add those really quick. So I'm going to shift duplicate that, bring this guy down, duplicate it again. We'll rotate it 90 degrees. So we'll just kind of tap that guy at 90, which Granted, it's going to be a bit of a pain, so I'll just do rotation 90, and we'll do -90, and then we'll control duplicate and move it across to the other side. Now, of course, you don't have to do it this specific way. You could do screen bounds or anything like that. But typically, this is just an easier way to approach it for a lot of people. So I figured that this would be a good way to approach it. Now, we'll run that. So you'll see it bounces. It's going to bounce, and you'll see that that worked, right? So now the guy is bouncing around, and we can hit it with our paddle, and our paddle doesn't go anywhere. That's perfect. We're basically halfway there. And the fun part is I can kind of swing my paddle to the left like that, and you'll notice that it kind of imparts that adjustment. You can actually adjust where your guy is going by hitting left and right. So that's how Brick Break kind of works. It lets you adjust the speed at which that ball moves based off of how you kind of hit that ball. So that's really great. Now we have our ball kind of completed, right? At least for the most part. There's one last really big step that we have to have for our ball to be completed, and that is handling how it's going to interact with different objects. So when it hits the bottom of the screen, right? Or when it goes and hits a brick, what happens, right? So we need a way to handle all of that. We're going to go into our ball here, and in order to detect collisions, we could do a collision detection system like having a Godot signal, but instead what we can do is we can actually do state.getContactCount and pull back what we are contacting. This is a different way of approaching it. So I figured it'd be cool to show you guys this. Instead of showing you guys just the one way where you guys go and you connect a signal to the ball and say hit the thing, this time I'm going to teach you guys kind of how to manually code it, because it's a bit more useful if you're doing more complex interactions. So if I come in here and I type if state.getContactCount, and we'll say if that's greater than 0. So if we are contacting anything, then I'm going to want to process that information. So I'll say for I in range state.getContactCount, then we'll say, okay, whenever we collide with something, I'm going to want to get back those objects. So I'll say var collider is equal to state.getContactCollider object I, and that's going to pull back that object. And now from here, I have a good understanding of what that object is. It's an object that I'm hitting. So it's whatever I'm colliding with. So it could be the brick, it could be a wall, it could be a paddle, right? At least in this specific case. Now it is mad to feel arguments get contact collider. So I'm going to need to get contact count instead of contact collider. And that's my fault. So it's going to be get contact count. So if we have contacted with anything, we're going to loop through those contacts, and then we're going to pull back each one and then parse the data manually. So we'll say if collider dot is in group, then brick, then we will go ahead and queue free. So we'll say collider dot free, like that. So we'll say queue free, and we'll also add in a kill plane. So if collider dot is in group kill, then we will go ahead and queue free, like that. Now, when we collide with something, we're going to check its group, and then we're going to determine if we're going to destroy it or if we are going to destroy ourselves. Now, that means that we need to assign our groups. And the reason why I'm using Godot's grouping system is because Godot's grouping system really is a good way to approach separating out your objects. So we'll come into our 2D scene, we'll select this guy, the lower one. So I believe that's this one. Yes, it is. So we'll grab this one. We'll put bottom kill plane, top wall, left wall, and right wall. There we go. Now the bottom kill plane will come over to our node groups, add in a plus and type kill. I believe that was what we called it, was kill. Yes, right here. So we'll use that. And then for the brick, we'll go ahead and add it into the brick scene, or the scene group as well. So now if we click on this guy and we hit play, you'll see if it bounces and I intercept it real quick like that, it's going to be really hard to hit this brick, so I might need to duplicate it. Oh, I might hit it in the first, I was going to say I might hit it in the first try. So if we hit our bottom plane right here, it didn't do anything. So what gives? Well, the reason why that happened is if we take a look at our ball, this is a common issue that a lot of people run into. Why isn't this working? Well, if you take a look right here, this is called continuous collision detection. And by default, it is disabled. And if it's disabled, that means it's not going to call out contacts that it runs into. So you need to have contact monitoring on. And if you want, you can have continuous collision detection set up as well. So it's up to you on if you want both, but I prefer to do both. So I'm going to turn this on to cast ray. I'm going to do contact monitor, and the maximum contact that I'm going to report is 10. So on max, on an insane 1 frame hit, it will report up to 10 objects. So if for some reason you hit 10 objects or 11 object, it will only return 10, but it's for performance reasons. You can actually, set it to whichever number you would like. You could probably get away with 2, really, but just in case, I'm going to do 10 and we'll refresh it. So now you'll see if we let this ball hit the kill plane, well, once again, nothing happens. So that's not a good sign because it should have fixed our problem. So that means that we have a bug. So let's take a look and see what that bug is. So if I come in here, I'm going to take a look at my ball. We'll put a breakpoint right there. I'm going to refresh. Let's see what happens if it hits the wall. Okay, so it definitely detected the object. So collision is operating as expected. So that's a good sign. That's our first big good sign. If I put a breakpoint on the kill plane, it does hit the kill plane. So, okay, so that's kind of strange. All right, well, it looks like it worked this time because the ball's now gone. So I feel like there was something kind of wonky going on, but at least it works now. So that's good news. We're good to go for that. So now that we know that that's actually working, we'll have to hit a brick and verify if that's working. So let's grab a brick right here. I'm going to drag this guy down so that way I have it as a scene. It's just a good idea to have it as a scene. You probably should do the same for your ball as well. So I'll just drag that guy down, ball, and perfect. That will be totally fine. Now, if we click on our brick, we can duplicate that brick, bring it over. I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see what's going on here. So I'm going to duplicate this brick and pull it over like so. I'm going to grab these 2 bricks, duplicate them, pull them over like so, duplicate, pull over, and one more time. There we go. We're going to hit play. And hopefully if it hits a brick, which somehow I was so close earlier, but this time not so much. So there we go. That should hit. And there you go. So now the brick is gone. Awesome. So at this point, we have a very basic game, right? The ball goes away if it hits the kill plane, which I kept my breakpoint here, so we'll get rid of that. And you'll see it goes away. So we do have a very basic game, which is really exciting. But how can we make this a bit better, right? How can we make a score? How can we make it so that the game has a game over state, right? And how can we make it so we have lives? So let's talk about how to actually keep score. So when we collide with something, we're going to want to queue free our brick, but we're going to need to add to our score. Now, in order to do that, that means that we need to have some way to interact with a thing kind of like above our ball, because our ball can get destroyed, right? So when it hits the kill plane, right, it's going to get destroyed. So since we have a queue free here that's going to destroy this object, that means that we have to have something kind of above it to keep track of all of that additional information. So we'll come up to our game manager, we'll right click, attach a script, and we'll just call it game manager.gd. That's totally fine. Now, we're going to need a couple of things here. So we're going to first need a var, and we're going to need a score, right? Because, you need to have a score for your game to run. What else are you going to need? Well, we're going to need lives. So var lives. We're going to make that equal to 3. And we're also going to need probably a var for if we're going to have a game over. So var game over, and we'll make that equal to false, like so. And then since when we have a game over, we're going to be showing their score. We're going to want some kind of timer so that they can't immediately restart. So we'll say var game over timer, and we'll say about 3 seconds, I would say. Now, how do we handle our score? Well, first we're going to need to have a func for that. So we'll say func add score, like that. And what we'll do is we'll say score plus equals 1. So great. Now we're adding to our score, but we need a way to display it to our players. So what can we do to do that? Well, all we need to do is come in here, right click, add a child node. We'll add in a control, like so, and that will allow us to have UI elements that will exist. And I'm just going to put this as UI manager, just in case I want to expand it in the future to have states or things like that. That's what this will be useful for. So now we can just right click, add in a child node. We'll add in a label, and we'll call this score. And then what I'll do is I'll type score : space. And now I can just call that by going $score dot text is equal to quote score : space plus str score. I'm going to default that score here to 0, by the way, and that will just allow us to have something in our UI before we actually get a score. Now, if we click on this guy here, we'll come over here, we'll drag our score to the upper right. I'm going to duplicate that and do the same thing, but for lives, because I'm already here, I may as well do it. We'll say lives, like that, and I'm going to go lives, like that. Now, default is 3 for lives, so we'll go with 3 for our lives. Now, of course, if you want to change that, you're welcome to. If you go into your game manager, you could come in here and do a @export lives, like that. And then on ready, you could just go $lives.text is equal to quote lives : space plus lives. And we'll do an str on that, because you can't just take a string and combine it with an integer. Since they're different types, it's going to cause problems. So we'll just do str to cast it as a string. So we're going to say, I want this integer to become a string, if that makes sense. And that's basically how we'll approach it. Now, we also need a function to handle if somebody removes a life. So func remove lives, or I guess remove life, because it would make more sense for it to be a life, not lives. We're not removing multiple, we're just removing one. We'll say lives minus equals 1. If lives is less than 0 or equal to 0, so we'll say less than or equal, then we know that it's game over. So we'll just say pass for now, or maybe we'll just print. So print quote game over. And then we'll go ahead and return. Now, what happens if we do have more lives, right? We have 3 of them. So our ball gets queued freed right here. You can see right here, we're queuing free. So what can we do to make this a bit better? Well, we can either do one of two things. We can either delete our ball and do queue free and then respawn it, or we can throw our ball and move it back into the position that we were at. And it's completely up to you on which one you want to do. Typically, in my experience, I would just respawn the ball because it's going to allow me to have a little bit more flexibility. So I'm going to go ahead and keep queue free. We'll come in here. We'll go get parent dot. And if we take a look at our game manager, it's called remove life. So we'll go remove life like that, and then we'll queue free. And now when we do a brick, we can basically do get parent dot add score like that. And that will allow us to add our score. And at this point, our ball is pretty much complete. So now we pretty much just have our game manager work to do. We're pretty much good to go. So we'll worry about this section here a little bit later, but when a ball gets deleted, right, from memory, we need a way to spawn it. So I'm going to come up here and go at export var ball. I think I'm going to actually make an adjustment to this lives as well. I want a capital L instead, just because it's being exported. That means I want it to be out there. So I'll do capital L just because it's going to give me a little bit of anxiety if I don't do it properly. So we'll say export var ball, and we'll make that into a packed scene like that. And once we have that, then we can click on our game manager and you'll see that we have our ball. So I'm going to drag my ball into the location like that. So that way I don't get a null reference. I've had that happen a few times. And then I'm going to say var current ball is equal to ball dot instantiate like that. And that's going to instance that ball. Now we need to choose where we're going to instantiate this ball. So we'll say current ball dot position is equal to, and we'll set it equal to somewhere, right? How do we know where we want to spawn our ball? You can see right now we're spawning our ball here. Typically, when you're doing a spawn system, you want to have a way that's really easy and simple to use. So what we'll do is first, I'm going to move this ball down just because it makes more sense to be down here, and we're going to kind of center align it. And I'm going to center align these bricks as well, because I'm sure somebody's probably freaking out that it's not centered. So we'll just kind of bring it down like that and center it. We'll do the same thing for the paddle because it should be relatively centered as well. It's not perfect, but it's much closer than where it was. So we'll just kind of center it out like that. Now, we need a way to know where this ball is. So what we'll do is we'll put a coordinate in there for us to actually use. Now we can do this multiple ways. If you right click on your game manager, add in a child node, you'll notice that if we get rid of this guy, we go down to node 2D, they do have a marker 2D. And a marker 2D is for us to use to basically say this is where something's going to be, if that makes sense. So we're going to use this. But technically, you could get away with just a node 2D. We're not really doing anything too crazy that requires the marker 2D. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to drag this marker 2D right here, and I'm going to call this ball spawn point like that. And I'm going to go into my node. I'm going to click the plus icon, and I'm going to type ball spawn point. And we'll make that into a group. So that's going to be really good because we only have one, and it's going to allow us to have a single spawn point for our ball. Now, if I take this ball and I command delete or just hit the delete key if you have the delete key if you're not on a Mac, and we'll actually spawn this on ready. Let's go to our script. Let's grab this bit of code and actually control X, and we'll bring it up here because I'm going to test this out first and see how it works. So current ball position is equal to, we want to grab all the nodes in that group, and we really only want to pull back the first one. So we'll say get tree dot get nodes in group quote, and I believe we called it ball spawn. We'll double triple check just to make sure. ball spawn point. So we'll say ball spawn point. And then we'll pull back the first element, which will be 0, dot position, like that. And actually, we should probably pull back the global underscore position, and we should probably do the same thing for this ball as well. So global underscore position is equal to that. And that's going to give us a very simple way for us to know that our stuff's going to work. And now we need to add it as a child. So we'll say add child current ball. And in theory, that should just work. So if we hit refresh, well, index out of range, we have a 0 index out of range, get index 0 on base array. So that means that our ball didn't get found. So that's not a good sign, but let's take a look and see. If we click on our ball spawn point, you'll see that it was not added to the group. For some reason, I thought it was, but that's totally fine. So we'll click on that and we'll click refresh. Now you'll see the ball spawned right there. So now what we can do is when you hit this section, you just spawn the ball and do this exact bit of code here, right? So we could copy and paste it, or we could create a function. And in my case, I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to create a function. So we'll hit Control X and I'll type spawn ball like that. And then I'll come down here. I'll type spawn ball, and then I'll type func spawn ball like that. And I'll paste that like that. And now, in theory, if done correctly, we'll hit go. You'll see we have a ball. We'll let us die real quick. So we'll let the ball come through and he dies. And you see that another ball was spawned. Simple enough. Now we do need to reset our lives. You can see we have 3. We should be at 1 life left. And now it's going to come down and die one more time. And you'll notice that we get a game over. So it's working, which is awesome. But you'll notice that our lives wasn't working. Our paddle position is not being reset as well. So we'll come in here and we'll come to our lives here. We'll hit $lives.text is equal to, and I'm basically just going to grab this guy, copy it, and hit paste. And that will update our lives counter. Now, if we want to reset our ball's position, paddle's position, we could come in here and have a reset. So how we could do a reset is we could say var reset position, and we'll make that a vector2 like that. And then we'll say func underscore ready reset position is equal to the global position. And then all we have to do is come down here, add in a function called reset position, like so. And then we can say global underscore position is equal to reset pause, like that. And then in our game manager, we'll be able to come into here and go $paddle dot reset position, like that. And now you'll see when we play, if I move my paddle over here and then I die here, well, it's not happy. Non-existent function reset position. Oh, it's reset position. Like that. I'm sorry. For some reason, I thought that that was the title of the function. So we'll reset that and try it one more time. And you'll see that our paddle has been reset. And you'll see our lives counter has been set down to 2. So awesome, right? Now we have our score, we have our lives, and we have a game over state. Now, granted, it just says and prints game over, but at least it's some kind of state. So now the question is, okay, how can we handle a game over, and how can we actually reset our game? Now, in order to handle the game over state, let's basically fill this section out. All we really need to do is create a UI that pops up and says, hey, you're on game over. And we need a way to handle waiting for the user to put an input. So in order to do that, we'll come in here, we'll right click our UI manager, we'll hit add child, and we'll go ahead and add in a control node. The reason why I'm picking a control node is because it's always good just to nest things inside of Godot. It makes things a little bit easier to work with, if that makes sense. So I'll bring this over here. We'll go and grab this guy here. We'll make it, I don't know, about yay big. Actually, I'll probably just center align this, which is centered aligned over there, but that's because my UI manager here is not fully sized. I will make that expand out to the full rect of the screen here. And then I'm going to grab my control node. You'll see it is now dead center in my stuff. So I'm going to right click, add a child node. We'll add in a label like this. And then we'll come in here and we'll center align it. I'm going to come into my inspector and type game over like that. And what we'll do is we'll come down here and make it a little bit bigger. So we'll come into our label settings and we'll do a new label settings. So we'll open that up. And this is relatively new to the Godot tools, which I really appreciate because it allows us to stylize this really simply. So we'll just make this from 3.9 to something like 12, maybe. We'll come into our font. We'll make it from 16 to 20 or possibly maybe 40. So it's nice and big. We'll give it a little bit of an outline. That's going to help give it a nice bold look. And then we'll grab a shadow, which I'm going to make black with high alpha. So, or with low alpha, I should say. And then we'll kind of make it just a bit bigger. And if you zoom in, you'll see that there is a slight shadow there now, and I can actually offset it by doing this if I want to. So I'll just make it like 3 pixels. It's going to make it look kind of old and retro-y. So, because a lot of times that's what they used to do is stuff like this to make it look more, you know, official, if that makes sense. And then we'll duplicate this label. So control duplicate. We'll drag this down. We'll type score : space 0, and we'll set it to 0 for right now, but that doesn't mean that it has to be. Now I'm going to come into my label, right click, make unique, and then I'm going to come down into my font size and we'll make it just a little bit smaller, something like 27. And then for the outline, I'll change this down to like 2, maybe 3 outlines. So that way it's just a little bit nicer, a little bit more, you know, easier to read at such a small size. Now, horizontal alignment, I'm going to set it to center because we want it to be center aligned. And same thing with our game over, although it looks like that's relatively center aligned regardless. Now, I'm going to come in here and also duplicate this, drag this down, and then type press any key to continue. Like that. And then we're going to change the size of this. So we'll come in here, right click, make unique, and then we'll adjust the size of this. We'll get rid of the outline. We'll get rid of the shadow because I don't really know if I necessarily like how that shadow's looking. So we'll do that. And then we'll come down here, make this just a tiny bit smaller, something like that right there. Now I'm going to come in here and type press any key. We're going to come in here and do score. And then we'll come in here and do game over. And then we'll call this game over as well. And actually, I'll change this to game over label. That way I can identify these guys at a glance, which one is what. So when a game over occurs, we're going to want to keep this hidden. And when it occurs, it's going to pop up on screen, right? And we're going to want to also set our score. So how can we do that? Well, if we go into our game, when we do game over, we can just type $game over dot show. And that's going to show it. And then we can set our score. So game over score dot text is equal to quote score : space plus str score. And that will actually set our score. And now all we have to do is make it so that when we press any key, it actually allows us to reset our game. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is basically set a Boolean on whether or not we're game over. And if we are game over, we're going to not want to take input from the user immediately. Because if we take input from a user immediately, it's going to cause some issues. Because if you're holding left or right, the game's going to take that input and it's going to immediately reset your game. And you might not want that. So we're going to give them a 3-second cooldown so that way they can't just immediately start the next game. So you can see here, I have that cooldown right here, and I have the Boolean right here as well. So first things first, we got to set that Boolean. So game over is equal to true. And then we have to do our countdown. So if we come into here, we can say if game over, then we can count down our timer. So we can say game over timer minus equals delta. And if you don't know this, delta is the time between frames of your game. So it's always a consistent value, or it's always a consistent ticker for your game. So basically think of delta as like a second. It's the time in which process has been ran last until this timer or this process has ran. So it basically is the time difference between the two. Like if this one runs and then that one runs 0.2 seconds later, then the delta is going to be set to 0.2, if that makes sense. And that gives you a very consistent timer. So that's why we do minus equals delta. And then all we have to do is say if game over timer is less than or equal to 0, then we can go ahead and check for input from our user. So we'll say $, if input dot is anything pressed. And if so, then we can go ahead and reboot our game. So that's going to be get tree dot reload current scene. And there you go. Now, when it comes to this, we don't want to show press any key immediately. So I'm going to hide press any key. And then I'm going to come in here and say, okay, if this happens, $ press any key dot show. Because if we just show press any key to continue and we're still ticking down our timer, that's a big problem, right? Because the user's going to think, hey, or the person that's playing our game is going to think, hey, I could just start this game again. Well, in reality, you can't. So that's why we don't want to show press any key until the 3-second timer has happened. And now we can test this. So we'll hit play. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to stop it really quick. And I'm going to set my lives to 1. So the nice thing about it being exported is I can click right here and I can set it to 1 like that. And now I can refresh my game. We'll let myself die here and we'll see how it goes. So the ball's spinning. It's doing its thing. It hits. And I didn't get anything, which is interesting. So I still have 3 lives, even though I set my lives to 1. But we'll see. Game over. I can hit left and right. My character can move, and I didn't get my press any key. But I think that that's acceptable. I think that's fine. But I don't know why I have 3 lives. I shouldn't have 3 lives because I set it to 1, unless it didn't save or something like that. So we'll let this run through. It just takes a few seconds, and then we'll let it sit for a second. You'll see game over. We're waiting for 3 seconds, and then it says press any key to continue. If I hit spacebar, the game resets. So awesome. Now we have a actual game here. And you can see, I guess I didn't click off of this, so that's why it did 3 lives instead of 1. So that makes sense. And if we hit play and we let the ball go over here and we bounce it off of our paddle here and it hits a ball or hits a block and then I die, game over, score is 2. So perfect. That's doing exactly what we want as well. Now, a lot of times in these retro games, they used to have an animation that would play where the press any key to continue would flash or grow in scale and go down in scale. And that's actually a really easy thing to do. All we got to do is just right click, add any child node, add in an animation player like so. We'll come down here, click new, and then we will do pulse like that. Now I'm going to click on press any key and I'm going to show both my game over and my press any key. Now, if we take a look at this, you can see it's right here. What I'm going to do is I will come in here. I will click on font size and I'm going to make a key and I'm going to use Bezier curves and we'll click create. And then here at 1 second, I'm going to change the size to be not that big. That's wild. 20 instead, and we'll do a breakpoint there as well. You'll see that it makes it just like that. Now, that looks terrible, so I don't think I'm going to do that. So let's go ahead and back off on that. And my guess is because these font sizes are PX size, so it goes up 1 pixel size. So I don't think that's going to work. So let's come down here and instead do a layout transform size right here. So we'll hit a keyframe right there. Actually, let's do scale instead. We'll drop a keyframe, use Bezier curve. We'll come to 1 and we'll set this to 1.2. And we'll set a keyframe. Potentially. Let's see. And you'll see that's going to be a lot better, right? So you can see it goes up and it's a pretty gradual look. Now, something that I don't like is you'll notice that it's growing in a weird pattern. And the reason why it's growing like that is because you can see right here, there's this little pivot point here. That's called a pivot offset. That's what this guy is right here. If we move this, if I put this at something like 100 or 110, or 105 maybe. Nope, it's going to be 107. 8. There we go. That's about right. You'll notice that if I put this down some, so 50 maybe, or maybe 20, that's close. So 25, there we go. You'll notice that now it's going to scale just like you would expect. And the reason why is because that's where it determines where it's going to scale from or where it's going to move from. So if you put this right on the Y for key, it's going to scale almost perfectly. Now this is great, right? It scales, but I need it to kind of pulsate, right? So how can we do that? Well, the beauty of Godot is that it has the ability to repeat actions. And that's right over here, this little guy right here. So if we click on this and we click on it a second time, it's going to do what's called a ping pong. So if I hit play, you'll notice that now it pulsates as we expect. Now we can go and faff around with this. We can make it however we want, but I think something like that's probably okay. We could probably go down a little bit in size and make it maybe a little bit faster so it doesn't quite go as big or as flashy or whatever. But this is a very basic tutorial, so this should be fine for what we're doing. So I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to hide this guy. I'm going to hide my game over UI. And I'm going to go into my game manager. Whenever we want to play something, we need to actually call on it, right? We need to say, hey, I want you to play this. So we'll come in here and we'll go $ animation player dot play, and we will play pulse like that. And now if we hit play, in theory, this should just work. So we'll come like this. We'll let that bounce. And you'll see that we have a game over. And then once it pops on, you'll see press any key to continue. You hit spacebar, you can now continue your game. Now, if you don't like the velocity of where this ball goes, I kind of chose that at random. So, you could come in and actually make it a little bit better. If you come into your ball here, so if you look at your ball script, so we'll open it up and we'll open up the ball script. You'll see we have a velocity of vector2 1 minus 1. If we just set that to 0, like so, you'll see that the ball will now go forward instead. So if we go into our game manager and hit play, that will allow it to just go forward like normal. So if you want it to work like that, that's totally fine. You can. It's just something to keep in mind. Now, I set it to an angle just because I figured it would be easier for people to kind of understand what to do there. Now let's talk about how to handle your end game state. So you have a way for your player to actually die, right? But you don't have a way for them to kind of move on to the next level. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a quick adjustment here. So in our game manager here, we have a UI manager, we have a game over, we have a UI manager, and we have $paddle.reset position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, right click, add in a child node. I'm going to add in a node 2D like that. Now I'm going to call this level 1. And then I'll drag this all the way up to the top like that. And I'm going to grab all of these guys other than my UI manager and put it underneath this like that. And now I can basically just grab this and put it down like that and call it level 1. And all I have to do now is just say $level 1 dot get node paddle, like that. And that'll basically allow me to get the exact same result, but just abstracting it out to a level 1. And now what I'm going to do is I'll come into level 1. I'm going to right click, attach a script, and call it level1.gd. Now, all this is going to do is do a very simple code here. I'm going to go var bricks, and I'm going to come down here and say var bricks is equal to get tree dot get nodes in group quote bricks, like that. And I believe it's actually just called brick, if I remember correctly. Let me take a look real quick. So if we click on a brick, you'll see it has the brick group right there. So this is going to get all of our list of bricks. And basically, once all the bricks have been destroyed, we will have the call to kind of move to the next level, if that makes sense. So that's why we're going to pull all these bricks, and then we're just going to monitor whenever a brick gets destroyed. We'll just say minus that brick. So you'll notice that if we come in here, there is a section in here for our ball, because our ball, when it spawns, just spawns into the level underneath. It'll probably spawn on, and if I remember correctly, the ball is going to spawn inside the game manager section. So I think that might be okay, but I might need to adjust that. So if you look at this spawn ball right here, we might need to pull this down into the level instead, but I think we might be able to get away with it, because I don't think the ball calls anything specifically that we're too concerned about. If I take a look at my ball, if it hits a brick, do that. That's totally fine. So that should be okay, but that's going to be a problem, because our level 1 is going to need to know when a brick gets destroyed. So we can either monitor when a brick gets destroyed, or what we could do is, if we take a look at our brick, what kind of signals does a brick have? So we can see whenever it's entered, whenever it's exited. So that could be a good one. What we could do is do this func on brick exit, like that. What does this actually return here? It returns nothing, but it emits after it has been removed from the scene, basically. So that should actually work. So we'll say on brick exit bricks dot, and if I hit dot, you'll notice that I get nothing back. So I'm going to make this equal to an array. That way that gives us some kind of type sensitivity here. And we'll say dot remove, and I got remove at, so I don't know if I want to do that yet. Dot erase, and I'm going to erase the brick that's being removed. Now, unfortunately, right, removing a brick is going to be hard. So what we'll do is we'll say brick, and then we'll erase the brick, like that. And then I'll come in here and I'll say for I in bricks, and we'll say bricks dot and I'm going to do a basic lambda function. So I'm going to say func bracket bracket colon self dot on brick exit, and I'm going to pass in I, and that in theory should work. We'll see how that goes. But once we have this, it should allow us to know how many bricks we have in here. And then we'll just check if our bricks is less than or equal to 0. Count is less than or equal to 0. Then we can basically say our level is completed. Now I'm going to create a signal for this, because it makes sense to have a signal just to say, hey, this level is completed. So in order to do that, I'm going to come up here and say signal, level completed. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to emit that signal. Like that, and that should work. Now it's saying too few arguments for count, so I'm probably thinking of size instead of count, because unfortunately between C# and GD script, they're two totally different languages, so I get those mixed up sometimes. But now that I have this, I'll be able to go into my game manager here, and I'm going to call this, well, really, this doesn't need to be level1.gd, because all it does is just handle this. So really, we could probably just make this a class name like this, and then just call it level manager, and then rename this to level manager, because really it probably doesn't need to be anything like level 1. It probably should just be level manager, like that. And then that would allow us to have it, you know, make more sense for what it's actually being used for. And now if we go into our game manager can house an array of levels. So we'll say var, actually at export var levels, and we'll make them packed scenes like that. And I'm curious if I could do an array of packed scenes. And I think I actually have to declare it like this. Hold on one moment. We'll say array like that, and we'll type it as a packed scene. And it did not like that. So I might need to do open brackets like that. There we go. And now you can see if I click on my game manager, there we go. I have an array of packed scenes. So I can add as many levels as I want right here. And then I'll be able to just do command delete, go ahead and remove that, click on my game manager, and then drag in level 1 like that. And now I'll be able to actually handle when a level is completed. So on ready, what I can do is I can spawn new level like that, and I'll come down here and I'll create some logic for that. So I'll say func spawn new level. And I should probably go with a lowercase s. I don't expect anyone to be using this outside of the game manager. It's mostly just for the game manager itself. And then what I'll do is I will come up here, and when we spawn a new level, we need to know which index we're at, and then we need to basically spawn that new level. So I'll scroll up here and I'll say var level index, and I'll make that equal to 0. Then I'll pass in the level index. I mean, technically you don't need to pass it in, but I feel like it's just a better practice. So we'll say level index, and then we'll come in here and we'll just say var current level is equal to levels bracket bracket level index. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not going to pass it in because I'm going to want to increment that value. So I'll come in here and say level index plus equals 1, and then I will spawn in the next level. The only time that this could possibly be a problem is when we have our first level. So I'll do this as -1, so that way it's a 0-based index. Because I want this to increment 1, so I'll just start it off at -1. And then we'll just say current level dot instantiate, and then add child current level. And then I think what I'll also do is I'm going to do a var current level as well up here, because now that I'm thinking about how this is going to work, I think it would be good for us to have that. And I think instead of having a var, we'll just do that. And that's basically going to allow us to keep track of our current level. That way, when we move on to the next level, we can remove our current level. So we'll say if current level does not equal null, then we can remove that current level. So current level dot q_free like that. And that'll rip out that level and get us ready for that next spawn. So now in theory, if we take this level here, level 1, we duplicate it, we call it level 2. We go into level 2 and we make a quick adjustment. So level 2, we're going to make it so that these bricks get duplicated and dragged down. So we'll drag them down like this. And in level 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it really simple because I want to do some testing here. So I'll come in here and I'll just get rid of all of the bricks except for the one because I want to test to see if this logic works. So we'll remove those. We'll just drag this brick to the center. And then in theory, this should work. So we'll drag this guy here and let it go here. We'll give us 3 lives because may as well. And if we take a look at our game manager, we do have our process where we spawn a new level right here. And then this will run. It should spawn our first level. And then once we destroy all the bricks, there's no way for us to know that that happened. And that's something that I just thought about because we don't have that capability. You'll notice that we have the signal here, level completed.emit. So we need to actually hook that up. So we'll come into our level manager and we'll say current level dot, and I believe the signal is level completed. So we'll grab that level completed dot connect. And when the level is completed, I'm just going to spawn a new level. There we go, like that. And that should hopefully roll us to that next level. So let's see what happens. We're going to hit play. And if it doesn't completely blow up, we might be cooking with some gas. Well, it blew up a little bit. So first things first, current ball dot global position. So the ball hasn't been spawned because the level has not been spawned, because spawned level happens first. So spawn ball versus spawn level. Now, looking at this, this feels like I should make this into its own section of the level manager instead. I do know that when we remove a life, if something dies, it kind of tells the ball here to get parent.add score and get parent.remove life. And I feel like we should put this under the scene instead of underneath the game manager because it just makes more sense. So we might have to do a little bit of refactoring here because this is probably not the best way to handle it. So I think what I'm going to do is signal chaining a little bit. So I'll come in here and I'm going to make 2 signals called add score and remove life. And I'll just come in here and instead of doing this, I'll just say add score dot emit like that. And then I will also do remove life dot emit like that. And then I can basically take my game manager. I can come in here and say current level dot spawn ball. And then I'll just grab this guy, Control X to get rid of it. I'll go into my level manager. I will do spawn ball like so. And then I will change out this guy right here. I'll take this guy out. I'll bring it into my level manager as well right here. And then I will come in here, Control X that, put it here and say current level dot spawn ball. And that'll just kind of readjust everything a tiny bit to make it a little bit better off than what it was. I'm also going to come into my level manager here and hook up those different ball signals here. So I'll say current ball dot, and if I look at my ball, I have add score. So I'll grab that, go back to my level manager dot connect, and I'll need to connect that to something. Now, the best part about the Lambda function I was telling you about is if I come in here and I go signal, and actually I don't really want to do that. Let me come into my ball here. Let me just grab both of these guys, copy, go into my level manager, paste, and then I'll come down here and I'll say, and much like what we did inside of right here, you can see right here. So we'll say func bracket bracket colon or parentheses colon. And then all I'm going to do is just say add score.emit like that. And then I'll just duplicate this. And instead of doing add score, I'll do remove life because that's what the current one is doing as well. And then I can go into my game manager. And when I spawn a current level, I can connect like this, add score, and remove life like that. And then I'll just come up here and I'll do add score and remove life. And I'm probably going to take add score, make it a lowercase a. It just makes more sense to have that as a lowercase a now. Nobody else is going to be accessing it outside of the class I have this in, so it should be pretty good. So now if I run this, let's see what happens. Well, we almost got there. So invalid access to property or key level completed on base object type. Oh, I see. I figured out why it's doing that. So var, we're going to make, this is why it blew up. So I figured out why. So we'll hit Control X, we'll do that. And that should fix our problem. The reason why is because we were setting it instanced to the actual packed scene, not the actual instanced scene, if that makes sense. So that should solve this problem, hopefully. So we'll go ahead and run this. We almost got there, but not quite. So it got all the way down to the level manager, invalid access to property or key tree exit on base type array node. So I'm doing bricks. It needs to be I instead of bricks. So that makes sense. So let's do that again. And now it's mad. Cannot instantiate null value. So that is because if we take a look at level 1 and level 2, our ball is empty. So we're going to need to set that. Now, the nice thing about doing it this way is if you have different balls or if you have different things that you want for your game to have, you'll be able to make that adjustment here as well. You'll be able to have different color ones or different speeds or different attributes, things like that. I'm also going to rename this to level 2 just because it's going to bother me if I don't. So now, in theory, this should work, hopefully. There you go. It's going to hit this one. And now we're on to the next level. Now you'll notice that the ball did not spawn, but we are on the next level. So that's good news. That's exactly what we wanted. So we're basically 90% of the way there. So how can we spawn another ball? Well, if we take a look, you can see current level dot spawn ball. So when we come down here, when we add our child, we'll just do current level dot spawn ball right here. We'll copy, paste. And that means that we could probably just get rid of it right here so it doesn't spawn another one, and we should be good. Well, now it's mad. So non-existent function on base 2D level manager, spawn ball. So I'm not sure if I agree with that, but let's take a look at our manager. It's lowercase s, not capital S. I'm going to go with a capital S because that makes more sense because it's going to be accessed outside of the class scope. That's usually my own way of doing it. I know some people have different ways, but that's my way of keeping track of everything. So you'll see capital S, that should work. So we'll refresh. There's our ball. It's going to hit the guy. And then there's our ball. And now the gameplay is as normal. So you just play it like Brick Break. And that's pretty much it. Oh, before I disappear from you guys forever, something that I noticed is we do actually have a bug right here. So that is because we want to do current level dot get node paddle, and that will solve this problem. But just know that that's a bug, and I just found it. So change that to current level, and that should solve your problem. I'm going to triple check real quick just to make sure that it all works. So we'll do this. Boop, there we go. And it removed that life as expected. Okay. So now at this point, you have a very basic understanding of how to make Brick Break. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, if you dislike this video, go and hit that dislike button because I'm here to make content for you guys. This video was a viewer suggested, as with all of the videos I ever do. One of the videos I'm investigating currently is how to do OpenCV, and how to host Nakama yourself, and how to create a iOS add-on using your MacBook. So those are some things that have been suggested recent-ish, and I'm, looking at them and getting them all set for tutorials. So all of your guys' suggestions really do matter to me. And the best way to put in a suggestion is by dropping it in the comments below, or jump on my GitHub, link is in the description for that, and you can put in a ticket. That's usually where I keep track of a lot of these things, and it keeps me a little bit organized. So you're welcome to put in a suggestion right there, and I will be more than happy to take a look at it. And hey, if you have any questions or comments about this tutorial, please leave them in the comments below, or jump on my Discord, link is in the description for that, and anybody there will be more than happy to help you out. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Thanks.